Hello art fans, this is Scott Thompson Art. I'm your host Scott Thompson, and today we're going to talk a little bit about color mixing and keeping paintings sort of within a range of being harmonious and value ranges reading correctly when they are adjacent to one another. What we're looking at right now is the color wheel. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the color wheel because I lean more towards painting with a limited palette and making sure all your colors work together. But real quick, we'll just go over this. This is the color wheel. We have the warm side juxtaposed to the cool side, and here we have the different configurations. On A we have complementary, on B we have double complementary, on C we have split complementary, D is analogous, E is triadic, and then F is triadic complementary. The only one of these that's analogous is sometimes you'll see paintings sort of a sunset that sort of range along the analogous side of the color wheel, but sometimes you get a real interesting effect when you contrast real warm colors to real cool colors. Van Gogh did this quite a bit in his paintings in terms of his shadow areas. He had warm areas bumped up against cooler areas, which caused a real nice vibration on his canvas. But I really want to speak more about painting with a limited palette. So let's move this out of the way. And we're going to talk about the benefits of painting with a limited palette. So the 7 benefits of painting with a limited palette are a greater balance through your painting, easy color harmonies, less chance for overmixing, which is a big one, faster way to paint, forces you to think about tone and composition, and then also you're having to utilize warm and cool colors. They work more effectively to achieve contrast rather than adding more color. More importantly, it's easier to pack and cheaper to buy. And in short, a limited palette is more efficient. If you use just 3 or 4 colors on your palette and use them consistently, you gain more control over your color mixing, and it simplifies the thought process. Finally, Monet loved to use a limited palette to paint some of his amazing outdoor impressionistic work. He achieved more luminance by having to utilize more mixes rather than from a variety of colors. And he used just 3 colors, a warm and a cool of each. Now, going back up to this list here, a few things I want to point out. The less chance of over mixing and the easy color harmonies. So basically what that means is anytime you want to mix color, this is a good rule of thumb. When you mix more than 3 colors together, odds are you're going to end up with mud. That's what we refer to it in the art world, which is a real dingy brown. Doesn't really go with anything. It has no vibrance or color luminosity to it. The color harmonies is important because you want everything to relate in your painting together and work in harmony. And when you're trying to sort of pull in 25 colors you bought at the art supply store, then it makes it more difficult sometimes for this to be achieved. You may have a tendency to sort of want to dip your paint in every single color just because they're there and just because you want to use them. And but by the time you get done, you have a painting which has no relative elements within the painting. It's just a bunch of different colors in different areas. What I'm going to show you next right here is an example of a limited palette painting. So we see these colors here at the top, which are much like the palette I use, which I'll get to in a minute. We have our yellow, we have our orange, we have our cad red, we have our ultramarine blue, and then we're going to have white in here. And so what this shows you is when we start with just a very simple palette up here, of course we got pretty close to the primaries. We've got our blue, our red, and our yellow. Then you start to branch off into these different color sections. You have, this is maybe a first tier, this can be sort of a second tier, down to a third tier. And so by utilizing a limited palette and having an accurate knowledge of color mixing, then you tend to really save a lot of money. I mean, look at all of these colors. We're talking, 25 or so, and think of the cost of that as opposed to just saying, I'm going to spend a little more time mixing these colors. I'm going to save money, and all of my colors are going to be in harmony. We don't see anything on this sheet which is really high key, which is sort of a neon green or too bright of a red. Everything is sort of working together in harmony. These little notations are sort of the combinations, yellow plus orange, the blue and the yellow and the orange and so forth, and going through these little sort of equations. Now, when mixing color, you have to remember that it is a lot like baking a cake. You're putting the ingredients in, but it depends on the ingredients you're using, the amount of the ingredients. For instance, if I'm looking to mix a green color and I use 3 parts yellow and 1 part blue, then I know I'm going to have a much more yellow green as opposed to much more of a blue green. If I use 3 parts blue and I use 1 part yellow, then I'm going to have more of a jade green because it's going to be heavier on the blue. Normally what I tell people to do when mixing color is start with your lighter color and then just pull in little tiny segments of your darker color into the mixture. If you start with a darker color, you're going to use a tube of paint to try to bring down or lighten your darker color, so to speak. So this is what you can do with a limited palette in terms of painting. These few examples right here I'm going to show you, these are all done with a limited palette. These are different landscapes, different configurations, even from daytime to nocturne paintings. And so these are all done with a limited palette with the same colors, but look at the variety of ranges you can get in terms of mixing color. Now this is just a snapshot of what you can do, but it's just a real quick sort of tutorial in terms of color mixing. So here are the colors that we have on our palette that I recommend using. Of course, I've left Viridian off because I'm really not going to work on any type of a nighttime scene or anything real high key with my greens. But we have our titanium white, our ultramarine blue, our cadmium orange, our cad red light, and our cad yellow medium. So in general, if I'm starting with, let's just start mixing up some bands of color and see what happens. So take, for instance, I'm going to do a landscape painting. I'm going to start with my white, and I'm going to mix my blue into my white because it's the darker color just being pulled back into the lighter white shade. Let's put a little more in there so it looks a little more like sort of a cool sky blue. Now, once I've mixed up sort of my sky color, then, well, let's say perhaps I have some kind of a low or high horizon, which maybe has some type of a hill in the background, and the hill is going to be kind of a grayish brown, maybe just a hint of red in it. So this is now the hillside in the back of my painting. And then let's say beyond the hillside, we're going to have variations of greens in a field within the painting. So let's mix up some greens here to the side, right here. So I'll have a sort of a mid-level green, and I'm going to have a little bit more of an intense green here on the edge. A little bit more of a vibrant green down here. Okay, so now we have these two greens, and we have a mountain color, and we have our sky color. So how does this work in terms of using a limited palette? The first thing you will notice is I have not gone off and I have not mixed up colors in separate segments. They're all flowing together. They're all right here together. Why is that? Because when I go into my painting, then I'm going to mix a little bit of the sky blue into the mountain color. And what that will do is that will force that mountain back into the background and make it look hazy and make it fall back way back into the background and give it atmospheric perspective. Then I have my greens over here that are supposed to be sort of in the backdrop as well. I'll take a little sky blue and I'll put that into the green. I may add just a little bit of yellow. And I will take this blue color and I will sort of tone down this green just a little bit. So now we have, what we have is we have two stacks. We have a stack here and we have a stack here. These are sort of my original colors. If I need to go back into them and get these sort of mixed colors here and here, if I need to continue to mix more color. But what we see is we have a sky, which is this value range. We have a mountain that is this value range. And then we have a background green closest to the mountain, closest to the horizon line, that is this type of green. And why is this green working with this mountain color and this sky color? Because I have pulled the sky color back into these two initial colors. And that gives it harmony. There are no value ranges on here that look out of place. And I can do the same thing. I can temper the green down and come up with different values of green just by pulling in that green. Now I've got another value of green. What you don't want to do, which is a common painting mistake, if I come down here with my yellow and I got my blue and I put a little more yellow in it, and then I get this kind of green that looks like this, that has no of the original colors which I mixed back into it. Do you see how intense? You may be able to see it, you may not be able to see it, but this green is way too intense. It has now become more dominant than anything within this familial mixture, like I like to think of it. So when you're mixing paint, think of it almost like family members. We have, you know, the father and the mother and the son and the daughter, and then perhaps the grandchild, but they all are related across this spectrum because we all started with this color and this color. And we didn't go off and mix tubes of paint here, a green here, a sky color here, a red here, a blue here, with having no relation between the colors. So this is one of the benefits of using a limited palette. And in the next segment, I will put these down on a panel and I will show you how they read in terms of accuracy and value relationships.